My name is Roommate, bringing you the 50 Shades of Horror. With this being the 31st, only 19 are scarier. The picture, released in 1991, is named The Silence of the Lambs. If you're in the market for streaming it, here's where to look. The film's reputation precedes it. I trust you've heard of Hannibal Lecter. It's so easy to stumble upon references to this diabolical doctor. While he's graced the screen before and since, this is where he became an icon. This character, played by Anthony Hopkins, is a villain for the ages. And while the cannibal psychologist steals his scenes, he is not the story's core. Clarice Starling, a stellar FBI trainee, drives the narrative. She's been handpicked up out of her classes to help on a manhunt. There's a serial killer active in America, leaving skinned victims behind. Clarice is tasked with going toe-to-toe with the incarcerated doctor. Crawford, her supervisor, hopes Lecter would have insight into these killings. The at-large killer has the moniker Buffalo Bill, but he's a mystery.
Can I help you with that?
Would you?
Sure.
Thank you.
That's all right. You look kind of handicapped.
Yeah.
With the murders being spread out and disconnected, fear is in the air. So Clarice must fortify her mind while speaking to this evil genius. They need his sinister expertise, but she can't let Hannibal into her head. This is such a great premise, setting up a brilliant, thrilling horror film. This film rides the line between thriller and horror, though it leans towards the latter. The elements of the police procedural are evoked, but they don't set the tone. Clarice may be surrounded by law enforcement, but she's on her own. Her fellow good guys don't provide the sense of safety and justice you'd expect. The film's monsters are too terrible and instill a hopelessness only horror can.
2 of her fingernails are broken off, and there's dirt or grit under them. It looks like she's tried to claw her way through something.
The plot is well structured, making the 2-hour runtime breeze by. So if you haven't yet, sit back and drink up the best the genre has to offer. And for those of you who have watched, let's cut right to the heart of the matter. With the story spoiled, we can ask, what is it really about? What does Clarice want? She wants to save Bill's next victim, but what has brought her down this road? While Lecter wants to escape more than anything else, this question allures him. At first, he's wary of her youth, doubting her acumen compared to his own. But after challenging her, he learns she's no ordinary trainee. He attempts to push whatever buttons she might have, but she stays the course.
Jack Crawford is helping your career. Do you think Crawford wants you sexually? Do you think he visualizes fucking you?
That doesn't interest me, Doctor.
She does have an inner vulnerability, but she keeps it hidden. Lecter gets her to explain her lost innocence, how she was orphaned. We learn that this film gets its name from the wake of her devastation.
My father was a town marshal. One night he surprised 2 burglars. They shot him. When he left me, I had nothing. I was 10 years old.
She is sent to live with her extended family on a sheep farm. And when the sheep are slaughtered, their cries terrify Clarice.
You think if you say poor Catherine, you could make them stop? You think if Catherine lives, you won't wake up in the dark to the screaming of the lambs?
She wants to help them, but learns that seeking freedom is not in their nature. Lecter delights in hearing Clarice's story, drinking in the bouquet of her anguish. Since Lecter never divulges his reason for wanting her story, I'll try to shrink him.
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
At first, he wants to test her, to see if she'll break as easily as most do. But as he digs deeper, he finds out how formidable she is. When she dupes him into believing in a phony deal, he's impressed. There is one thing that enthralls Lecter more than anything else: power. and he loathes anyone who indulges in the pretense of false power. As he delves further into her psyche, he sees her true strength. Her motivation to mire herself among these murderers was pure. She wasn't playing the victim, looking for some group to shelter her. She felt something primal and animal, and threw herself into pursuing that feeling.
I took one lamb and I ran away as fast as I could.
Where were you going, Clary?
I don't know. I didn't have any food, any water, and it was very cold, very cold.
That her emotion drove her to save rather than slaughter didn't matter to Lecter. He saw a person who, like himself, was so driven that she'd become unstoppable. He knew he was in the presence of a master of her own will. Petty amusements or grievances can't distract her from her mission. So this plot hinges on a lawful heroine charming a serial killer. A romance of sorts blossoms between the cruel and the compassionate. Neither of them can operate within the constraints of conformity. Whether to be wicked or kind, they just want others to stay out of their way. This mutual respect and admiration for each other lets her learn about Bill. And while our hero must learn to communicate, our villain doesn't. Bill hates the idea of conversing, being as impersonal as possible.
It rubs the lotion on its skin. It does this whenever it's told.
Though he clearly has the upper hand to his captive, he's scared to face her.
It places the lotion in the basket.
I want to see my mommy.
Put the fucking lotion in the basket!
His motivation for killing and skinning his victims ties back to this as well. As Lecter points out, Bill has tricked himself into believing he's transgender. So Bill is trying to fashion himself a suit from women's skin. He wants to transform, to become a new, more beautiful thing. But unlike a trans person looking inward and finding their truth, he's superficial.
Frederica used to work for Mrs. Lippman. Did you know her?
No, Oh, wait. Was she a great big fat person?
Bill is a grotesque machine designed to do one thing: covet. Having spent his life coveting women, he idolizes and abhors them. He doesn't understand how to create a bond with them, cursing them from afar. He can't see attraction for what it is, the push to get people close to each other. He sees allure as its own end, ignoring its intended payoff of intimacy. Rather than wanting to be desired by others, he only needs to desire himself.
I'd fuck you so.
He wants to transcend his struggle by being both the object and the subject of lust. Our hero shirks layers to show her true self. Our villain dons them as a mask. The face-off of these two extremes is what the entire movie builds towards. Though for a moment it looks like we'll be deprived of that confrontation. We're treated to perhaps the best fake-out of all time at the climax. Crawford and the rest of the FBI are descending on Bill's location, and the editing seems to make it clear that Bill's about to be sworn. But it's only Clarice at his front door, unaware of who he is.
Does the FBI learn something? The police around here don't seem to have the first clue. Have you got like a description, fingerprints, anything like that?
Though her keen eye reveals who he is quite quickly, and the hunt is on. There have been scary segments throughout the movie, like at the asylum. Clarice's investigation at the storage facility was also nerve-wracking. But those are nothing compared to Clarice blindly navigating this twisted abode. This is probably the most realistic movie in the entire challenge. And I find this realistic, stripped-down horror so immersing and compelling. Well-trained, but caught off guard and alone, Clarice's fate is uncertain.
I'm gonna get you out of there, but right now, you listen to me. I've gotta leave this room. I'll be right back.
No, don't you leave me here, you fucking bitch!
While not grandiose, her struggle to stay alive and catch Bill is riveting. It's so natural to put yourself in her shoes, fearing what lurks in the dark. When it looks like her fate as Bill's next victim is sealed, her killer instinct takes over. Her keen senses point her in the right direction, slaying the dragon in his dark cave. The Bureau heralds her victory, but a shadow lurks behind her triumph. Clarice was able to not only catch the killer, but save the last victim's life. But the cannibal whose favor she curried? Now he's a free man. He orchestrated a bloody escape, leaving several bodies in his wake. The symphony of slaughter he conducts will surely claim more victims than Bill at this rate. The film's final scene shows how Hannibal plans to enjoy his freedom.
I'm having an old friend for dinner.
So we are left with ambivalence, torn between optimism and cynicism. We've seen Clarice's determination and strength snuff out an evil forever, but we've seen those same traits in Lecter spark an infernal blaze with no signs of stopping. We're left to wonder, will their wills clash someday, and who'd emerge victorious? But what if they wouldn't fight at all, finding a love that exists beyond good and evil? This ambiguous allure the two titans feel for each other brings us to a unique space. There's mutual respect, each playing a part compatible with the other's desires.
People will say we're in love.
It shows how the power to cause or stop cruelty comes from the same place. The hunger of the predators and the terror of the prey cannot be ignored. Understanding both roles in this dance let these two lead it to their desired ends. And they can't help but admire as the other keeps in step so expertly. In their heart of hearts, they crave opposition to conquer, since it would show their strength. Cruelty and compassion won't completely kill the other. They both need their partner.
I have no plans to call on you. The world's more interesting with you in it. So you'd extend me the same courtesy.
You know I can't make that promise.
Today's recommendation for another review is for James vs. Cinema. A filmmaker himself, his channel shows his first time watching reactions. James is laid back, making picking apart a tense film like this surprisingly relaxed. He pays close attention to the craft, such as how the shots are framed in these clips.
Hi, I'm Barney.
I'm so intrigued by why they decided to shoot it with the camera facing right in front of the people. It's a lot more dynamic. You get to see a lot of the subtle movements in her face.
The link for Filmmaker Reacts to the Silence of the Lambs is in the description. The 32nd movie in the challenge is Re-Animator. This mad scientist film from 1985 can currently be streamed here. It'll teach you the secret of life and death between your trysts with a bubble-headed co-ed.
Sounds charming.
Don't worry, I won't make you wait long for the next one. Until then, keep your head on.